We're talking to Kevin Iole, the beat writer for MMA and boxing, our head honcho here at Yahoo. You're in Abu Dhabi now, so we're rolling this back a little later. But I wanted to preview it before you get over there because I don't know what kind of access we're going to have. This is going to be a really interesting card because there aren't a ton of Americans going over there, and you can see what's happening here. Like Australia, the UFC has to sacrifice a little bit in terms of their normal exposure to break new ground in new countries.
Well, I think it's a smart business move, frankly, even though they do. In other words, you saw the show in Newark and the crowd of media that they had there, and that workout that they had in advance of it. When we went to see Shane Carwin, I've never seen as many microphones that were around a guy as I saw around Shane Carwin that day at a UFC fight. I've obviously seen it at other sporting events, and so that's a good sign. Going to Abu Dhabi, not going to be that way. Myself and Ariel Helwani are going to be the only U.S.-based journalists that I'm aware of. They're going to be credentialed for the event and going to be over there. So, they're going to lose a lot of that. But I think what it's doing is, they're opening it up to the rest of the world. They're showing the product to different parts of the world. And I think that in the long run will help them. So they're not being short-sighted. But there are things like, from Australia, I was having trouble, Steve. I was trying to Twitter stuff during the fight. I was trying to send you stuff to post on the blog. And the internet was up and down. And obviously, Sydney, Australia is not a third world country. And neither is Abu Dhabi. I mean, these are, advanced, first world countries, but, they've run into this kind of problem. And so, that it's an issue that, they have to deal with, something that they have to get solved. But the fact is, that I think it's a smart move for them to take the show on the road, bring it around different places in the world and expose it to media in other markets and fans in other markets. And I think that in the long run, it'll benefit them.
Interesting for the fighters as well. You mentioned the long travel. There's going to be an adjustment period. I think we see that often with the British fighters. I thought a couple were a little lackluster in Charlotte. So that's going to be a challenge. Also on the card, it's outside. And what's the weather like?
It's it's summer type weather over there, and it rarely rains. I mean, it rains less in Abu Dhabi than it rains here in Las Vegas, so it's not a lot of rain. I don't think that's going to be a factor. The question is going to be wind. What kind of factor is wind going to be that day? And I don't actually think it's going to affect the fight so much, but it may affect the TV broadcast with the microphones and the wind howling, and it may make it a little bit uncomfortable for the fans if in fact that happens. But I was looking at the weather, and we're looking at in the mid 80s and sunny weather, and obviously it'll be in the evening, but I think everything is going to work out okay.
Back to one more issue, which is the international expansion and trying to find dates for all these places. Now, it's pretty clear there's been an absence from the UK shores for a while here, and I'll tell you, at the UFC 111 press conference, one of my favorite guys is Gareth Davis. Gareth is a real media guy, and I'm not saying people out there are not, but I think people who have worked with a lot of different sports have a little more bluntness, me. And Gareth was very blunt in asking Dana White at the press conference in saying, hey, what's going on with the British cards? All Dana White could say was fly to Abu Dhabi. Well, I mean, that's easier said than done. So what do you think about Gareth's concern and the British media's concern that, hey, this thing is blowing up in the UK, and all of a sudden now we have no fights?
Well, I think it's an enviable position for the UFC to be in, that you have media that's, hey, bring it here, bring it here, bring it here. I think that's what they want. I remember back in 2002 that it wasn't quite the same way. When Frank Mir was going over to fight Ian Freeman, I mean, there was articles in the media over there, stop this tragedy, this is a horror, we can't have this come here. So it really, it's changed quite a bit, Steve, and, you have to give the UFC credit for helping to change that. There are a lot of markets, and they have to hit all those markets, and so it's not easy to just keep bringing it back to the UK all the time. They've done, I think, a really good job. And one of the issues in bringing it into the UK is obviously they'd like to come out of London quite a bit, but the O2 Arena is so far out in the boondocks, and the media in the UK, media in London doesn't really particularly care to drive out there. Makes it difficult to get the kind of coverage that they want to get. It's hard hotel-wise, logistic-wise, and everything to do a fight out of London at the O2 Arena. So they don't do as many there as maybe they would otherwise if the arena was in central London. as a result, they go to some of the other cities, and it's not as big a deal coming from Birmingham as it would be coming from London. But it's a valid concern. But I look at it, I don't think it's a huge deal, and I think the UFC is being smart about how they move it around. The one thing that they chastise us all the time is we say, well, they're going to go to Dublin. They say, yeah, but that's not UK.
To wrap it up, I think you make a good point. I was thinking of the same thing when we started covering this, years ago. I think you started covering it in the 30s in terms of UFCs, and I was in the early 40s. And back then, you could barely get out of Vegas. People forget it was a big deal just to do that Anaheim show in California, and now you've got different cities around the U.S., Canada, the U.K. screaming, going, "Hey, what about us?" So times have changed, and it's happened very quickly.
It's always a joke, those of us who have been around for a while, we go to a press conference and you hear Dana ask questions by either fans or reporters who haven't been there. And the questions are always two things. When are you signing Fedor? And when are you coming to X market? And, it's like the answer is always the same. We're going to sign Fedor. We're going to sign so-and-so. And we're also coming to every market. But that's a good thing. They've built it to a point where people really want it. People are competing for it. The media is putting pressure on the people in the city. And I think it's nothing but good for MMA, and I wish boxing had that same thing going on.
And I promise in the future, next press conference that I'm at, I will ask, when are you going back to New York? When are you going back to Radio City?
I just hope you don't cause any more trouble at the next press conference you're at.
I'm looking forward to getting booed by maybe 2,000 people next time.
Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you what, if it's Madison Square Garden, they might call you up into the ring so that you can have 18,000 boo you in the round.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Have fun.
Okay, Steve, thank you.